All right. Here's a definition of developer experience. This is actually the first result that comes out on Google when you type developer experience into it. First compares it to user experience, saying that it's equivalent to it when the user of the software or system is a developer. So it describes the experience developers have when they use your product, be it client libraries, SDKs, frameworks, open source code, tools, APIs, technology, or service, or a CMS framework, as you might know. Yeah, I think it's a good definition. Probably there are others, but I think this one is good. My name is Petar. I'm from NetGen. And few important information about me. For 5 years, I was a member of EZ core development team. I joined in the beginning of 2012 for the version 5 rewrite. And for the next 5 years, I worked on it, mostly on EZ Publish kernel repo, so repository API, search, field types, persistence, and stuff like that. My main interests today are search and developer experience. And I'm also author of the site API that we will look into today. Okay. I'm also joined by my colleague today, who you know from the last session.
Well, my name is Mario. I'm a backend developer at NetGen. I like to do stuff with the Symfony framework. I use it as my framework of choice. Also, I do PHP, of course. I have my second job. I have Chief Fire Officer, so I like to put the fire out when there is a need for it. Also, I have 2 children, and I'm a husband. So that's all from me. Pero, continue. Thank you.
Okay. So before we really start, I would like to know how many of you used legacy stack, or is it published version 4? So, yeah, okay. So pretty much as I expected, about half or so. Yeah. I come a lot to the legacy stack to make a comparison because I think the rewrite from version 4 to version 5, which was a complete rewrite, was a kind of a defining point. So we will be looking a little bit into legacy as well, how the things work there. So where we are at today, our current version of the software that we are using, it's called EZ Platform, and the current version is 2. But this is really the same architecture that was introduced in the version 5 rewrite, which was, as I mentioned, it was a rewrite from scratch, so blank slate. It was later on rebranded to EZ Platform, so basically EZ Platform 1 is EZ Publish version 6 and so on. But this is still the same stack. The updates since then were incremental. There was no big rewrite. Okay. So some similarities with legacy. We kept the data compatibility. So this really means that, for me at least, the content model in EZ is the core of the whole system. So we kept the same foundations, and we still have the same entities, although we renamed them. And by this I mean we have content, field type, previously called data type, location was node, content type was class, and so on. So we still have those same things. But some things are also different. We have a completely new public API, and we also embraced Symfony. So we have a new way of building sites. Symfony is, as you know, hierarchical MVC, so you can use sub-requests to do stuff. So this is quite important. And we also have a Twig templating engine, which we spend a lot of time in. Okay, so we are going to look for a little bit into how legacy did things, or how we developed websites in legacy. So this is a small template snippet from the legacy stack, and there are a couple of important things to notice here. First, you can notice that we are fetching the children from the template. So we are not passing the data to template, but we have methods to pull the data into the template. We also can access, we have basically simple content traversal. So you can go from node, which was a name for location legacy stack, to a parent. And the rest of the template is quite simple. We are just outputting the children titles. Okay. So in legacy, the templating language was much more powerful than Twig is today, which might come as a surprise to some of you, I guess. But Twig is actually intentionally dumbed down because the idea is that its purpose is presentation, not logic, not business logic. So you are not supposed to make any kind of logic in Twig other than simple, straightforward presentation logic. Another thing that you can notice in this template is that there is no special handling of translations. It's automatically resolved. So for example, we just fetch the content list and we work with it. Okay, so in legacy, a lot of logic was done in templates. You had all kinds of fetch functions, not just for fetching children, but also, I don't know, subtree, user data, sections, all kinds of stuff. The old documentation is still online, and you can look into it, but I think there is about 50 or even more of fetch functions. You could do everything with them. This approach might seem a bit weird from today's point of view, and I will actually agree in large part with it. But however, part of it was good. The part I mentioned about simple content traversal, for example, accessing the location's parent or children, stuff like that, it makes a lot of sense to do this directly from the template without having to do additional work outside of it, right? So, actually, already told about this. There were good sides and bad sides of legacy way. So today, back to what we have today, let's look how we do things now. But first, we will have to explain a few things. The first one is to understand what the public API is. This is really a repository API. This is the set of services that you work with. So content service, location service, content type, section, and so on. Public part means this is what is intended for you to use. So this is what Easy Systems publishes and promises to support, and not to introduce backwards compatibility changes and so on. This API can be, as you probably know, can be very verbose. It takes a lot of knowledge and a lot of code to do very simple use cases, common use cases when developing websites. So the important thing to know about this is that it was on purpose like this. It was designed as a general purpose API, so not only for building websites, but also applications, and well, basically any kind of stuff. Also websites, of course, but more than that. So this was intentional. An example of this verbosity. The use case will be find the image on the location's parent. So quite simple, right? So this is what you have to do in order to do that. Let's say you're starting from the content. You have to load the main location because we want to go to the parent of the main location. So you have to load this. Once you have the main location, you have the parent location ID of the main location. So you load the parent location. With this information, now you finally have the content ID of the parent location. So you can load the content. But you also need the language configuration. So you need to fetch the language configuration through the config resolver, and then use the content ID on the parent location and the language configuration to load the content. Once you do this, you need to use a special kind of helper to check if the image field is empty. And some other stuff, basically, you will need to prepare the data, pass it to template, and then present it in a template. There is no way to do any of this in the template. Okay. The other thing that is important to understand, I think, is how we lost the possibility, the ability of any kind of content traversal from the template. I actually remember when this happened. I believe it was in 2012 in Cologne. We had a workshop there. All of our developers gathered there to discuss some important stuff. We already decided on the Symfony, and one of the topics among many we had was how we are going to do things in the template, what we had before and how we are going to do it today. The choice was actually very quick. We decided very quickly, and we all agreed, because we already decided on Symfony, and Symfony had its own way of doing things. So you basically prepare the data in the controller, pass it to the template, and then in the template, you manipulate the data that you had from the controller. So basically, no pulling in data from the template, right? And that approach is sound, but we missed noticing that the big important part is missing. And the problem is actually in the design of public API, which is general purpose. So we have the public API objects in the template, but we don't have any kind of content traversal. You can't go from the location to the parent. You can't fetch locations, children, or relations from the template. This all has to be prepared in advance. Okay. Some of us actually noticed that something is missing. It was obvious that the whole system was not fluid or straightforward as it could be. And we actually often discussed this. And when we would discuss this, we always called it some kind of abstract term, this site API that would solve this kind of problems. However, we never managed to define what this was. As we did a complete rewrite, we had to, basically everything was missing. And we had to re-implement everything, and there was always a lot of work, and we just push on. But the conclusion I want to make here, that the public API is actually, okay, the problem is its general purpose, but it was designed in this way. So the actual problem for me, from my point of view, is not public API, it's the missing piece that we never managed to implement, the so-called site API. And the end result of all this was that while the Symfony choice was great, it was a very good decision, I think, we ended up with a general purpose public API and no real site API. For our site API, we only had a collection of helpers, field helper, translation helper, or that kinds of stuff. I think this needs to be said. The developer experience was very poor. And the productivity took a dive from what we had in legacy stack. And suddenly, to do any kind of work, you needed a PHP developer. While in legacy, you could do a lot of stuff without even touching PHP. Front-end developers were quite independent. Project managers, you were able to prototype quickly. And the whole system was just more accessible. And with this update, what happened is that we became less productive, and projects of certain size just fell out of our reach. We are not competitive. We needed too much time, and the price tag was too big, so we couldn't compete. So what happened, our projects naturally needed to become bigger, and we didn't even do smaller projects anymore. And I can tell you, some of us were not very happy about this. Okay, I will show you a small snippet that I did in 2013. So 5 years ago from now. it was called Site Helper. And the description of the class says, helper class for building multilingual sites the easy way. It intended to solve the problem of constantly having to deal with the language configuration. So it was kind of a layer that would solve this transparently for you. I did it to try to kickstart the discussion about what we should do to improve on this part. However, as I already mentioned, this never materialized. Well, until our site API way later. It's quite simple stuff. Since then, the API evolved, but basically it does, for example, this method loads the content by content info and then transparently handles the language criteria for you inside. Okay. So I was kind of aware of the problem. But to be honest, I was not really aware of it. I knew the problem is there, but I didn't really appreciate how important it is. This all changed when I quit working for EZ and I started to work on the projects again. The change in perspective was immediate and huge. There is a big difference when you have to implement something and when you have to use it. It's no comparison. I mean, this kind of loss of perspective of developer is a very known thing, but I'm always, again and again, surprised by it. So the conclusion that I came to is that good developer experience is not just something that is nice to have. It's fundamental. And this is where the first version of Site API came to be. And it was all about handling translations transparently, what I started 5 years back with the Site Helper. And this adds a thin layer, new layer of API on top of repository API. This adds new objects, which are called the same, are very similar, but are still distinct new objects. Content, location, and field. And they can exist only in a single translation. So it was all about handling translations transparently. And we will look briefly into the services and objects that were introduced in this first version. So we had LoadService, which is used basically for loading stuff. You have methods to load content by ID and remote ID, and the same for location. For both of them, the translation is transparently handled, so you will never be able to load something that you should not have access to on a site access. Then we had the find service with 2 methods to find content and locations. And this uses the same search API from repository. So this is really a very thin layer. But again, what it provides is transparent handling of translations. You don't have to worry about it. The idea behind find service is that it works with the configured search engine. This can be, as you know, Solr or legacy. This is important because we also have the filter service, which is basically the same, but it's a different interface and differently named methods that also use repository search API. But the difference is this works only with the legacy search engine. And the important difference is that this search engine has no delay with the data update. So you don't have to index data in order to make it available for search. And this was, for us, important in some cases because we still use the legacy admin. And there was a noticeable delay between when the data was created and when it was available for search. So if some important code depended on it, then the editor would create content and would not see it on the website, and we have to wait for the TTL to expire and so on. So this is why we introduced filter service. And since then, this is basically our default. We use it for everything that we can. And we use the find service only for advanced search capabilities like full text search, facets, and so on. Now we will look a little bit into the objects. We'll only go through the more important properties, not everything. So the content object, the name is immediately available. The content info contains content type identifier, which otherwise you have to load separately through the content type. The easy repository content object is available through the inner content property, and same for the inner version info. And of course, fields are only in a single translation, meaning in the correct translation. Then the location object, which was really simple, practically the same as the repository location, aggregating the repository location and new content info containing content type identifier. And the last one is field, which added field type identifier, which you also had to load through very verbose code. Field definition identifier, also inner field and inner field definition from the repository. The name and description is automatically resolved, and there is empty method, so you do not need any kind of helper in order to check if the field is empty. So this was basically the first version. One example of how this worked from the Twink template. So you can access the content name, content type identifier. It just showcases some stuff so that you can put the whole thing into the context. You can access the fields directly, and so on. Okay, so to be honest, since then, a little bit more than 2 years ago, Easy also improved. But they took a bit different approach. So instead of adding a new layer, they are modifying the public API. So in a way, it becomes less general purpose and more suited for developing websites. They first added prioritized language logic to the content object, and also from the version 6.10, and also site access aware repository layer in the version 7. So which approach is better? For me, the separate layer is better, and for several reasons. With your public API, you typically want to be conservative, because this is what you support long term. So you want to do it by the book, with the specific rules. You want to be very strict about it, because this is what you will support, what you will implement new stuff on. It needs to be well tested. Tor brings a way of doing things with itself, and also limits you what you can do with it. And having a separate layer gives you flexibility to implement things that do not necessarily even belong in the repository API. So why would you add fetching relations directly from the content object? If you want to implement, for example, a cache layer of the repository API, this could bring problems with itself. So basically, having a different layer enables you to do stuff without compromises. And it actually uses repository API the way it was designed to be used. For me, the answer is obvious. You will also see some of these things I mentioned here later. So this was the first version of the site API, all about translations, really. We were really very happy with it. You suddenly did not need to think about translations. You just loaded stuff and used it. Then one day, a couple of us discussed what else we could do to improve it. And we came to a kind of innovative conclusion. We need simple content traversal directly from our entities, and that also means making it available in the templates. through the new methods and lazy loaded properties. And this was our second big update. I will only show new stuff in comparison to what I already showed before. So for example, on content, you got main location. You could access it directly. It was lazy loaded on access. Content owner, inner owner user from the repository, and also fields became lazy loaded. So content now behaved like a content info until you accessed the fields. Then they suddenly were transparently in the background loaded and made available. And we also introduced some new methods on content. So you could get to the content's locations with the limit parameter. You could filter them, which was returning the pager Fanta instance. And same for the relations. You could either get one relation by the identifier or more relations with the limit parameter, and you could also filter them by the content type identifier returning pager Fanta instance. So very simple content traversal, not everything, like you could do in legacy with all kinds of fetch functions. You had basically the whole API on disposal. This only solves the very common use cases. And also location, we added a parent, so you could jump from one location to its parent, and you did not have to load content separately anymore. It was directly available. And lastly, okay, we also have new methods on the location, similar to what we saw before. You can get children, filter them by the content type identifiers, and same for the siblings. And lastly, we updated the field, aggregating the content. So it was kind of recursive. You could pass the field to the included template, and then by the need, you could access the content again. So this made a lot of sense. This made simple use cases readily available. You did not have to code anything aside. You could just use it because it was there, basically. One example of this. So basically, have the location automatically resolved in the template and injected there, and then you can filter blog posts with some pagination parameters. You can easily output parent content name, and you can display some metrics, number of results, max per page. You can iterate. This is actually a pager Fanta instance, and you can easily generate your pagination. This is what we got with the second big update. And again, about a year passed by, and we used this, and it was very, very, very useful. The third big update came when we were about to solve our mess with base controllers. Basically, in our base site, we had huge base controllers with some methods that did all kinds of filtering. And then typically in the project, you would override these methods and introduce some project-specific stuff. Basically, the whole setup was a bit difficult to maintain, to understand, and we were looking into how to simplify this. And for this, we were looking into the query type feature from the Easy Publish kernel. This is really quite a simple idea. It's basically about, I don't know how many of you used it, but it's basically about translating an array of parameters to the search query object, which you can then use in search. So I was looking, we were already actually using this, but only through PHP. I was looking how to enable this in our view configuration. And I quickly realized that this has huge potential. So on the next slide, I will show you what we came up with. I like to call it query types, but on steroids. We provide, with our implementation of query types, a set of built-in query types that cover most common use cases. This means children, siblings, subtree relations, all kinds of relations. Forward relations, reverse relations, even tag relations, as you will see. and general purpose queries. With this, we basically created a base for implementing new and custom query types that will inherit common behavior. We enabled using query types with any controller, not only with the query type controller, which you will be familiar with if you use this feature from kernel. You can configure any number of query types per view, not only one. We also introduced semantic configuration, not just parameters. And we also introduced global query type configuration. I believe this might seem a bit abstract if you did not use this feature anymore before, but I think it will be quickly obvious what this is about. So we have, I will demonstrate on this use case. So basically we have content of type article that has relation field authors, which is used to define relations to author type content, okay? And what we need to do is on full view for the author content, fetch all articles by that author. So you basically need to retrieve stuff by the reverse relations, right? You need to sort the results by title and paginate them by temp per page using URL query parameter page. We will first look into how this would be done in legacy stack. So as you saw before, you would do is with fetch from inside the template. The fetch is actually a special kind of fetch called reverse related objects content fetch. And then you basically just iterate over the objects. Simplified, of course. Yeah. The idea is just to get the gist of the approach. Yeah. Then here's how you would do it in the new stack without site API. You would basically, this code would belong to a service with your business logic, or maybe you would do this inside of a controller action. So basically you need to use search API. You will construct your search query with all kinds of criterions, field relation, operators, content type identifier, sort clauses. Then you will use search service to find your data, and you will prepare it and pass it to the template for presentation, right? And finally, we will look into how this works now with site API and our implementation of query types. You recognize this? This is content view configuration, right? Where you define the template, match it with the content type, you would optionally define the controller, and so on. And this is where you define your query under the queries key. Authored articles is the name or the identifier of the query. Then you have query type parameter, which identifies one of our built-in query types. And in this case, it's a reverse field relations, which returns content. This is just the convention that I made, basically hierarchically. So content query type relations, and the type of relations is reverse fields. Then you define some semantic configuration parameters. Max per page is 10. Page is kind of a special one because this prefix with the @ and equal sign, it's what identifies the language expression. So behind this, there is a small bit of PHP logic that will get the page parameter from the request object and make it available in the configuration. And then finally, there is an array of parameters for the query type. You define relation field, which is authors. You define the type of the content, which is article, and you define sort. So I think this is quite easy to read, right? I could show you this, and you could look at it for a minute or two, and you will understand what this is about. It's quite straightforward. So once you did this, then in the author HTML.twig, you would have this query available for use. So let's see how this looks. You would access it to the ng_query function. And the argument, the parameter is the same under which you configure this query. This is authored articles, right? Now you have your variable articles, which is basically the result of the query, and the instance of pager Fanta. You can iterate over it, and you can easily generate the pagination. Okay, a bit over time. So a list of our built-in query types, the one that should cover common use cases. So we have relations, content relations, formal or forward or normal relations, reverse relations, tag relations, which is a concept we invented that you will see later on, and also query types that relate to the location structure, so children, siblings, and subtree. And we also have some general purpose query types, both for content and for locations. So this was our third big update, which happened actually only a couple of months ago. Some conclusions about this. You saw the legacy way, you saw the by-the-book new stack way, and you also saw the site API way. In legacy, you had power, but the approach was dirty. Your logic was inside templates. I said it made sense for simple content traversal, but not for everything, obviously. You don't want to do everything inside of template. New stack was clean, but too verbose because of the general purpose public API. And you also had to know PHP well, the object-oriented programming, the API, and how to use it. And I believe the site API with this feature brings best features of both worlds. It is easy because we now have a simplified, abstracted version of the search API, but you don't do it from the template anymore. So basically, you don't pull data into the template, you push it in. It's kind of a dependency injection, right? You could look at it that way. You inject stuff into the template instead of pulling it in. And this is what I think makes it clean. So with it, you basically get clean templates, built-in queries, covering common use cases, and control of all of it from the outside. So to recapitulate what site API is, it's a separate, dedicated layer for building sites. It's on top of repository API. It's read-only. If you need to persist stuff, you use the repository API. This is very light layer providing features that you need for sites, right? It automatically resolves translations. It has its own set of objects with simple content traversal, with lazy loaded properties and methods. And it also has query types on steroids. And why would you use this? Because I think with this last update, with new query types, I believe that we have developer experience that is finally better than legacy. With this, you will get a huge boost in productivity. We validated this recently on a new project, and well, I'll not mention number, but the difference in the estimation and the result that we need, the number of hours that we needed for implementation was very big. So this is, basically, this is money, right? It's well implemented, supported, and tested. We use it. We know how to do this, and we are dedicated to it. It will save you from more boilerplate code, bugs and mistakes, and it will save you time. Okay, so So much for the introduction. Now we will quickly go over the installation. If you use NetGen media site, then this already comes as a dependency. You do not need to separately install it. But if you need to install it on a new project, you will do it through Composer. And then, of course, you would activate the bundle, right? There are two bundles here. The second one is an extra dependency that I created recently, and if there is time, we will also go a bit over this. And with this, you will get the access to the services. You also get the access to the view configuration, both site API view configuration and easy view configuration at the same time. And this will enable you to rewrite your site bit by bit. But the idea is not that you use both ways, right? The idea is to switch completely. And this is the main switch. It's a site access server configuration, which will, what you will achieve with this is basically translating URL aliases so that they are handled by the site API, by our view layer and site API controllers. So you will get in your templates, you will get automatically site API objects. So this is kind of a main switch for the whole thing. And we'll get to the documentation later on. This concludes my bit. And Mario will now take over to show you hands-on on some of the features. And in the second part, we will look on the query types.
Okay, so please fire up your VirtualBox machines. We will do some coding practices. Okay, first of all, did you manage to start VirtualBox machines? Yes? Okay, so first of all, please do git fetch origin. To get new data from the repo. Okay, did you manage to do this? Just the easiest way is just to open the PHP Storm, and then you have these two boxes in PHP Storm. You have a terminal window on the bottom in the PHP Storm, and you will be automatically redirected into the project directory. Okay. So location is www.easy site API. If you want to access through the Ubuntu terminal. Okay, and after this, please do git pull origin master rebase. It's going through. Okay, and after this, do git checkout. Of course, for example, you can navigate to this repository we are using, and first of all, git fetch origin, then git pull origin master rebase. Yeah. But you have to be in master branch. Don't do any checkouts, be in master. So this is the directory inside the VirtualBox. You have to go to www.easy site API. So did you manage to navigate to the project directory? Ah, sorry. Thank you. Okay, did you manage to do git fetch, git pull? And now inside the web browser, please open the repository that we are using for this site API. This one. You have this in Web Summer Camp site. Tracks easy and it's here. Okay, and on this repository you have assignments folder, and first of all we will do the first example, first assignment. So did everybody manage to do this? So have no problems? Okay. Okay, first of all, we'll talk about the templating, because this is the thing you will mostly be doing with Easy, doing the templating stuff. So the template functionality provided by Symfony framework is used in site API. Basically, you're just using the twig layer, basically twig functions, pretty much the same as the easy stuff. Now I'll just show you the references. For example, here is a list of all easy-based template functions and its NetGen site API counterparts. So for example, to access the name of the content in the proper language, you will have to use the easy content name function in template, something like this. But when you are using the site API, you just access .name, and you've got the content name properly translated without using any helper functions. For example, the same thing we have with easy field description. For example, you have to, in an easy way, you have to use the function, twig function. On site API objects, you can access through fields, field definition identifier, adjust, access the description, and it will be translated in a proper language. Also, we have the same for the easy field name, easy field value. We have a separate way of using easy image aliases. For example, you have to use ng image alias. Then, for example, one big thing when you need to check if the field is empty, you have to use easy isFieldEmpty function. For example, rendering content from a field is almost the same. You have to use ng-render function rather than easy-render function. And basically, that's it. So let's navigate to first assignment. So the goal of first assignment is to do rewrite of easy style template to site API style template. So for example, I will do one example by my own, and the second one will be done by you, so you have to do the coding job. Okay, so let's follow this. First of all, please do git checkout example1 start from the master branch. and you should be on example 1 start. All clear? Okay, what we are going to do, we are going to rewrite the contents of full/ng article template from easy Twig functions to site API code directives. So let's open the PHP Storm. So you have to go in SRC, NetGen bundle, more demo bundle, resources, views, themes, demo, content, full, and then we have ng article template. Are we on the same page? Okay, first of all, if you look at this code, this is some the code I have to do because the site API is pretty much tightly coupled to media site, so it's highly integrated. So I have to go back to easy way of doing things. So for now, just ignore this. Let's, for example, is it better now? Okay. So first of all, I will remove this. Now I have site API objects, but I'm trying to use the easy Twig functions. So the site should break, and most certainly it will break. So let's start in console server run. A full ng article. And use this link. You have a link to one ng article content object. And of course, we have an exception. That's nice. Okay, so let's get started. So in easy, you have to do something like this. We have to output the contents of line intro field in the template, and first of all we have to check if that field is empty. That is not empty. So we have to use this Twig function. So when we are using site API, we don't have to use Twig functions. We can write something like this: content fields line intro dot empty. You have to run it manually from the project directory. Okay, so now on this part, we are getting the easy field value for line intro. For the same thing, we have to use the Twig function. But if we are using the site API, we don't have to do that. We can just say content dot fields dot line intro dot value, and we will get easy field value. Okay, let's do the same thing here. I can remove, oops, sorry. Can move this one here. Okay, let's rewrite this one. Content fields. Dot full intro dot empty. Then we are using field value, this. So content dot fields, then field identifier dot value. Okay, then again we have another check. If field is empty, we have to write content fields. Again, field identifier dot empty. Again, we are not using the twig function. And for example, we need again field value, so content dot fields, again field identifier dot value. Do you understand what I'm doing here? You can manage to follow this? Okay, let's do this again. Okay, so to get the content info is the same like we are doing in easy way, just content info publish date, do whatever you want. Then again we have checks if field is empty, again just do empty on field identifier. For example, this is a very nice one example for generating the image alias. So you have to call the ng image alias, and you have to pass content dot fields dot image. So you have to pass the field value object, not field dot value, and the second argument is just an image alias you want to display. While in previous example, you can see that you have to, in easy way, you have to first pass field value object, then version info, and then the image alias you want to display. So it's three things. And in the bottom we have the same things. Checks if field is empty, rendering the content, and basically that's it. We will take some shortcut for this. If you go to assignments, you can just check out to example 1 finish. Okay, now we have the template completely translated to site API way of doing things in template. And now I have the assignment for you. So please try to translate the contents of full/ng news template from the easy way of doing it to site API way of doing this. The link is provided in the assignment, so if you open the link, it should be simple ng news content, Okay, you have 5 minutes for this. Does anybody needs help? No. Yes, basically you can check inside the content.fields if this identifier exists. Basically that's it. Did you manage to do the exercise? Yeah, but you have to check out the changes. Okay, now we have engine news templates here. First of all, you have to remove this upper part, set content and set location. Basically, the line 5 to line 9. That's it. And now if you open the URL for engine news, it will break. I see you've got the cheat sheet. Yeah. You guys have any problems? Yeah. Because every single value object from site API is basically just it is a swap out. Basically, just using the site API one, and basically the easy value objects are contained inside this API.
For example, on my project, I'm already using custom view location.
Okay.
And how can I install site API on that project?
Just require the site API. Well, if you're using a custom one.
So I need to adopt my custom.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have 10 more minutes before the coffee break. So let's check out the final step called assignment 1 finish to see the final results. Okay, now if you check this ng news template, you will see the end result. Basically, there's a little bit gain we've got by using site API. Did not manage to remove a lot of code, but that's okay. And to easier the migration from easy-based templates to site API directives, if you check out the site API documentation, at the bottom you'll find something like this: upgrade from easy to fix statements. Basically, you can use the power of PHP Storm to search and replace, for example, from easy is field empty, just put this regex and replace with this, and the contents of template will be translated. The same thing you can do for easy render field, easy field value, and easy render field with parameters, for example. Okay, so is this clear to you, how we have to do things the site API way? So there is no more easy functions, just called, for example, on field identifier.empty. It's quite a lot, maybe easier. You just write the code as you speak. For example, you don't have to use the functions. Okay, can we move on? Okay, the second part is called value objects. So with site API, we are providing the set of separate value objects. Basically, the same thing you have in easy repository API, for example, like content info, field, and location. Basically, those value objects, they do not extend from easy ones. Basically, those are just the separate set of objects we are using there. They have the same naming, content info, field, location, just like in easy. But what are the benefits? So for example, in content, fields are lazy loaded. So you don't have all the fields preloaded. So basically, if you don't access the dot fields, some field, those fields will not be loaded, and the site will be a bit faster, you know. So, and the best thing is that all those value objects, they still do not lose the easy ones. So for example, in site API content, you can access the easy content by entering .inner content. And also you can access version info, like content.inner version info. Basically, everything is preserved. But also we added new properties, like name. Basically, to get the name of the content, you needed to use easy twig function. Easy content name, content, comma, field definition identifier to get the translated content name. Now in template, you just enter content.name, that's it. Also, from the content in site API, you can get to its main location. So you just enter content dot main location, and you have access to main location value object. In easy, you have to preload this inside the view controller in the step before. Here you have it just inside the template. The third and probably the most interesting thing is the content owner. Basically, if you try to load the content owner, for example, in the controller, you cannot just do load content with content owner ID, because this will break, because the anonymous user doesn't have permissions to read the user objects, right? So you cannot access this. So you have to do shortcut. Shortcut is probably sudo function on the repository with a callback function. And here inside the template, just do content.owner, and you have the owner object, and .name, for example, to get the name of the owner of this content. Also have a few very interesting methods, like get locations, to get all the locations of the current content, and also filter locations. Basically, the filter method is returning the pager_fanta instance, so you can do, and you can also pre-filter this. So, for example, you want a bit more filtered results. It's very easy to do. Also, we have 3 new methods to make the content traversal even more easy. For example, get field relation to get the related content from object relation field. So, for example, when you have one relation, it's called object relation. And you have the second field, object relation list field, that's got a lot of relations. So to get the relations from that field, you have to use get field relations. And also, we provide a method called filter field relations, where you can filter those relations. So for example, if you have an engine article that's got some, for example, related multimedia is a great example. You can put, for example, images, you can put videos, galleries, whatever. And for example, in templates, here you can write, okay, give me just, from this field, give me just ng images. It will work. Okay, we have content info. Content info is somehow like proxy object, because you cannot get it directly loaded. There is no method in the filter service and load service and find service that directly loads the content info, because there is no need for it, because we have lazy loaded content object. And also, content info also has got EZ value object inside, prefixed with inner content info. Also, you have properties the same as on content, like name, main location, and content, of course, to get the true content of this. And one pretty much interesting property is the content type identifier. So basically, to get content type identifier, first of all, you have to access content, content info, and in original content info from EZ, you have content type ID, not identifier. So we have to use content type service to load the content type value object, and then from the content type value object, you need to get the property content type identifier. Here we have it preloaded inside the content info. And also, content info has get locations and filter locations methods.
Just 1 second. A little bit about why we kept content info. As I mentioned, the fields in the content are lazy loaded. So basically, it behaves like content info until you access the fields, at which point the fields become transparent available. So we do not really need content info. We could have put all the properties of content info on the content. We kept it only to keep the similarity with how the template looks in user. So it's a kind of convenience. Basically, just a container of
Okay, we have a location object. Also the same thing, we are keeping the convention. Again, having EZ location inside as the inner location. And there's a new cool stuff like content and parent. For example, you have location object, and from the location, you can get the content, which points to this location. And also, what I believe is probably the best thing, you can
just enter content.parent and you have the value object of parent location. So you can just walk to the content tree just by .parent. Basically, you can do pretty much amazing stuff with this. And also, two new methods for children. For example, getChildren, that will return all the children of this location. FilterChildren, of course, that will return the pager Fanta instance. You can do some filtering with this method. Also siblings, to get all siblings. And filter siblings, of course, that will return the pager Fanta object. Then we have field value object. Again, it aggregates the inner field. Of course, it's got new properties. Again, we have a content. So, for example, you have a field, and you can access the content from the field, that is in that content, actually. So it's a pretty neat trick. And also, the same thing as in content type identifier, you have field definition identifier. So in easy field value object, you have field ID, but you do not have field definition identifier. So again, you have to use field type service, I believe, and again load the field type to get the field definition identifier. And one astonishing method is empty. You'll use this all the time. Basically, this is the base function, the site API function, because is empty. Before, you have to use field helper to check if the field is empty. So much work to do just a simple thing. So no helpers required anymore. And best of all, what I like the most, all those functions that are provided with Site API, I like to call them safe functions, because you just go to the template, call the methods, get the content or get the location, whatever you want, and display those contents in the front end. You can consume it without the problem, because you know that content can be displayed without the problem of permissions. Translation will be properly resolved. Visibility issues are gone. Basically, you are safe. You are good to go. Okay, now we have an example. This time, we'll show the value objects example. So first of all, you have to check out the example to start. Basically, we have some default way of fetching the related authors. For example, if you open this prepared article, we have this related article that is related inside the object relation list field. And we are doing it by the book, so we are enriching the view inside the full view controller, fetching the authors, and displaying the authors inside the template, like you would normally do this. So we have this authors variable that is containing the authors content, and we are iterating this array of authors and displaying the author content name by using easy twig function. So in the task, now we have to replace this way of doing it in the controller and to do the same thing in the template, basically. That's one of the tasks, and the second one is inside the full page sponsored tag. We have parent location name. So we are displaying this ng article that's under the fitness. Fitness is the parent of this ng article. So we want to display its name. It is displayed. Okay, fitness. So let's check the implementation in the full view controller. We have the method for displaying the article. And first of all, to do it by the book, we have, by default, we have 4 dependencies just to do the simple value fetch. Basically, first of all, we have to check if the authors field is empty. If it's empty, we cannot fetch anything from it. The second thing, we need to get the field value in the proper translation. The third one, we have to load the author content, and the second, we have to load the author location. So let's go through this procedure like we would do this in the default way. So first of all, using the field helper, let's try to check if field is empty. You passed the content and field definition identifier authors. And if this field is not empty, we'll get translated value by using translation helper. Again, this. Okay, we have the value. We have to check if value is null. If value is null, then we do not have the value translated in a language that we are trying to display on the front end. So we have to check this. And of course, this is the relation list value object. And the relation list value object has got array of content IDs inside. So we have related authors, we have content IDs in the array, so we have to iterate that array. And first of all, we have to load the content. So do you know why we cannot just load the content and display the content in the template? Why do we have to load the location also? Basically, what if you have a related author in the engine article and that author is deleted sometimes? Basically, you have a reference in the relation list, right? And if you try to render this in the front end, you'll get exception, error 500, because you're trying to load the content that does not exist, right? So to check this, we have to load the location. And for example, if you have the content in trash, the content does not have location. So content is existing, but you don't have location. So that's one thing. The second thing, we have to check if that location is hidden or invisible. You cannot display something that's hidden, of course. And if everything goes well, we will add this author content to this view parameters and enrich the view, and very easily we can display this inside the template. And if you look at this, this is quite a lot of boilerplate code just to get a single relation, right? So what do you think? Can we do this in an easier way? Probably yes. Okay, so let's try to do the same thing, but without using the controller. So for example, first of all, we can remove this. First of all, let's check if not content.fields authors.empty, right? Then we can very easily say from this content, give me field relations in field identified with authors. Okay, so this will return us the list of content objects. And we have the site API value object, so we can just say author.name. So if we refresh, we still should have the same thing on the front end. And we actually do have the same thing, the same result. So basically, this function is rather useless. so we don't need one. We'll remove this. And of course, you have to remove this method from content view. That's some engine article. Okay, we don't need this. Okay. If we refresh again, everything should be okay. And come on. And it is. Okay, so we just removed the whole method from the controller. Quite a lot of boilerplate code with a simple tweak statement, right? Okay, the second part in the example was add parent location name to this div called full page sponsor tag. So let's find this out. So inside ng article, we have this div with class full page sponsor tag, and we want to display the parent location name, of course. So to do this, we implemented a simple tweak function, and we are passing it the easy location, easy current location we are viewing. So let's check the implementation. Okay. It is implemented by using the tweak extension system. To be exact, by using the tweak runtime extension. Did you ever use the concept of tweak runtimes? So basically, if you check this extension, there is no implementation of this function inside this class. Basically, it's in another class called demo runtime, like this. Okay, so the idea is to pass the current location, that is the easy value object, and we want to display the parent location name. So first of all, we have, in the start, we have 3 dependencies. You need location service, content service, and you need translation helper. So what is the idea? First, you have location, then you have to load parent location from parent location ID property. And then you have to load the content that is located on the parent location, right? So we are using the content service, load content, parent location, content info, ID. This is the ID of the content that is on this parent location. And finally, we want to get translated content name from this content. So we have a special method in translation helper called getTranslated_content_name for this usage. So basically, we had, again, quite a lot of code just to do a simple thing. And as you can see, it's working. Fitness is the parent. We are displaying fitness. So let's rewrite this. So basically, inside the full view template, you have 2 default variables. You have content and location, of course. So you have location. Very easily, we can say, give me parent. This will return location value object from site API. And then what we have to say is, we have location, we need what? We need content, right? So we have to say dot content dot name. Let's save this. Refresh the page. Again, it's working. We have fitness as a parent. So do you understand what we did just? Okay, we can go over the second example. We have, again, assignment. I will do this one. So you can check out 2 examples to finish, or you can just watch me doing this. So in the second part, we have this ng news. this is the content of type ng news. And we have to do the following. First of all, we want to list all the authors from the relation list field. So we want to be sure that we will get only content of type ng author. In the previous example, everything that was in object relation list field will be loaded. But here we just want to be sure that we are going to display the ng authors. So again, let's see the full view controller implementation for this. Again, we are doing the same thing, loading the field helper, translation helper, checking if field is empty, iterating through destination content IDs, then loading content, loading location, doing visibility checks, and if everything is okay, we will just add these authors to view and paste to the template, right? So in this news, you already have administrator user displayed because there is no related author. But I will show you how to do this in a template. Again, first of all, we have to do the check if content field is not empty. So if not content dot fields dot authors dot empty. Okay, we did the first check, and then we need to fetch only authors from object relation list. So we are going to use the filter function, content dot filter field relations. So I'm telling this function, okay, give me field relations from field identified by authors of type ng author. Okay. Filter field relations. Okay. And again, we have site API value object, so you can just enter author dot name. So basically, let's check this. ng admin UI slash credentials for administration are default easy ones, admin and publish. Okay, we have this news. It hasn't got any related author. So let's add one simple relation. For example, let's add John Doe, publish. And if we refresh, we should have related author here. And we have one, it's called John Doe. So basically, again, big chunk of code is rendered useless in our controller. But again, we have to do one fallback. It says, in case when author's field is empty, display contents owner name. So let's do this. So by the book, first of all, you'll have to get the content owner ID from content info. And for example, let's try to do this. This is John Doe. We will remove the author. Okay, edit. Remove this relation. Okay, if we refresh, it says administrator user. That's okay. And let's do one more thing. Let's log out from administration. So we are now anonymous users. And for example, let's comment this out. and just try to load the content of an owner just by using the load content method. Okay, now if we refresh, we are redirected to login page. This is because the anonymous user does not have permission to get the content of a user object. Basically, the administrator user it's user. It's got its content, but basically it's a user. So to get over this, you have to use something called repository sudo. Basically, this sudo function shouldn't be here because it's not defined inside repository interface. So basically, you are using this on your own responsibility. It's not in the interface, so easy publish, easy platform can change this. They can change the implementation. They should not support this because it's not set in the interface. So we are using this on our own. So let's try this. We'll save it. I have a problem. And now if you refresh, we have administrator user. Basically everything works. So again, quite a lot of boilerplate code. So let's replace this. We already replaced the authors. Now let's do the same with the owner. So as you already know, how can we get the content owner inside the API? Do you know? We can do some simple thing, content dot owner. And owner is content, so we can just say name. Again, if we refresh, everything works fine. And just to prove this, what I'm going to do, this is the ng news, I will kill this full view controller. So we are not using this method. Let's remove this method. Save, refresh. And finally, everything should be exactly the same as previously, and it is. Excellent. So we managed to implement basically the same functionality without a lot of boilerplate code inside the controller. Basically, we don't have single line of PHP code inside our project. So our project is empty. Our full view controller is empty. We have one more thing. It's location parent. We are using still this same twig function. Let's replace this by location dot parent dot content dot name. Let's refresh, and everything again working fine. So now we can do a clean out. We don't need this full view controller anymore. So let's go to services. Let's kill the controller. We don't need you anymore. Goodbye. Okay. You don't need controller. Again, we can remove the service definitions for this twig extension. We don't need you anymore. Goodbye. And of course, we don't need this code. Delete. Okay, everything's fine. So that's it. So what do you think about this? Do you like the way of coding with Site API? Do you think it's really more productive than the easy way? Okay, let's go to the final part. So let's say something about the services that are provided with Site API out of the box. So basically, we have a site service. It's something like easy repository, basically the service that is containing all the other, that is aggregating all the other services. We have load service, find, filter, relation, and settings. Let's say something more about site. So as I said, it's something like a central service, basically service that you will inject inside all of your services, and you'll be accessing filter service, find service from this site. This is your central point for working with Site API. Again, load service. This is something like content service and location service put together into one. So you have load content by remote ID, load location by remote ID. So every single method will return the content or location with proper translation result. We have find service. Basically, find service has two new methods, find content and find location. Find locations, pretty straightforward. And I have to mention that the find service is dependable on search service parameters. So for example, if you have a project and you set that you want to use Solr search engine, this find service will be using the Solr. And if you said, okay, I want to use legacy search engine, then this find service will be using the legacy. So it is dependable on the configuration. On the other hand, the filter service always uses the legacy search engine. So your queries are always going to the database. And basically, we had quite a lot of problem with Solr because it's got pretty much re-index lag. They say they've got real-time indexing, but that real-time indexing will never come. You can have basically something in real time. You will always have some kind of the lag. So we also provide two functions called filter content, filter locations. Functionality basically the same. Again, we have this relation service. This is pretty much service. For example, if you want to do fetching the relations inside the controller, you have to do some a bit more complicated logic than, for example, just filtering and loading the content from object relation list field. You would use those. Again, we have these settings. It's something like utility value object. Basically, it provides the settings of the current site. So it will list all the prioritized languages, always available setting, and it will provide you with root location ID. For example, if you have a site that's got multiple, so you have multiple sites on your easy installation, with this you will always get the proper root location ID result. Okay, let's say something about the base controller. So by default, in Easy project, you will extend from Easy controller that comes from, I believe it's core bundle. Extend from those. On the Site API, you extend from Site API bundle controller, and you type in the content view from Site API rather than from Easy core MVC something view. I'm not sure what is the full path. Then again, we have the two new methods called get site location and get site content. We still preserve the old ones, like get site, like get location and get content, that will return the easy value objects. And with this new one, you have the Site API value objects. And of course, you have to set the service definition for controller. This one, and again, is platform site controller base. Before you would set parent the easy controller, basically. Okay. Again, you have something to show up inside the pagination. So for example, when you're doing the search with search service, what you would do, you would first instantiate the instance of pager Fanta, right? Then you would pass the instance of adapter, right? that can go through the easy value objects. And then you would say, I want to start from page 1, or whatever you want, or from request from some get parameter, of course. And then you have to tell it how many results per page you want. And you have to do it all over again. Wherever you have pager, you have to write these 4 things. Basically, you have a lot of duplicate code. And for example, if you are not using the pager, you're just fetching the results, and you'll receive this, how it's called, search hits value object, I believe. And then you have hits property that's containing all those value objects. And what you will always do, you will for each through these results and getting hits value instead some array, and returning this to the controller. Again, duplicated code that you're using throughout all controller methods, basically. And we can do a bit more. So I will show you something about this. So let's first of all go to assignments and open the third one called services. So our goal is to show you how filter and find services work. Also, we will have to write controller code, for example. And in this example, we will also use filter. Okay, let's check out this. Check out this. Okay, if we open the PHP Storm, we have some full view controller skeleton, and we have to extend. So for example, we want to do the following. So inside, so we are enriching the ng recipe full view. So in the controller, we have to do this. We have to get the value from the field identified with tags, fetch the latest 4 ng recipes, content object tagged with some tags, we have to exclude the current recipe from the results, sort by publish date, and we have to use the filter service. Okay, for this I will just to check out to see the results, because I think we don't have much time. Okay. Let's refinish. Okay, this is our example. This is our recipe. Okay, this is the recipe full view, and we just wanted to add these 4 latest recipes tagged with this tag. So let's go into controller. First of all, as I said before, we have to extend from site API bundle controller, first thing. Then content view is also coming from site API. So content view. Again, so from the content view to get site content, you have the method get site content, and you have counterpart for collocation called get site location. And to get easy content, for example, just view get content, and you'll get the easy content. The same thing is with location. Get location will return easy value object. Okay. Again, checking if the field is empty, getting the field value. You remember this from the previous exercise. We need a lot of helpers for this. First of all, we would have to check if the field is empty. Then again, translation helper. a lot of boilerplate code, but now we are just strict into our business logic. You're just doing what we want to do, not to write boilerplate code. So, for example, here we have some set of criteria, the same thing as you would do in easy, instantiate location query, set limit, filter, sort clauses, and now we have this, as I said, central object, central service called site. Just set get site, get filter service, and filter locations, and just pass it location query object with predefined criteria, of course. And now we would probably need to write something like this for each recipes, search hits as hit, turn hit, value object, and then get res. Have to add this into some kind of variable. Something like this. Basically, again, duplicated code, but we don't have to do this. We have because we are using the default base controller from Site API. It's got all those traits already used in. So we have this convenience method called extract value objects that is doing all that job for us. Just call it, and you've got the content or location, whatever passed in. And basically, inside the template, we just have to iterate over the results. Something like this. Again, you know about this. The only thing what is different, you're not using the easy view controller. We are now using the ng controller, ng content view action. You're passing in the content and location. Pretty much the same with easy. Okay, that's it. Let's quickly go to assignment. I will be fast and I will check out this status. Okay, git. Okay, in the second assignment, we have a full view of ng article. Again, we are filtering with the tags. We want to use find service, and we want to display the pagination. Here's how end result look like. So we would have, I believe, 4 items at the bottom. Okay, we have 3 items rendered in the bottom with the pager. Let's check the code, how this is working. So again, full view controller. This is the view recipe method. We want to check view article implementation. Again, the same thing. We are preparing the criteria, checking if the field is empty. Okay, prepare everything. And here is what is different. First of all, here you would have to instantiate the pager font object, right? Then pass the adapter, pass the search service, set how many pages, how many results you want per page, pass the request object with the page parameter. And instead of 4 lines of code, you have just a simple method called getFindPager. For example, like this, you pass in the pager, pass in the query object, current page, and how many results you want per page. Basically, it's convenience methods. And you have 2 methods for find pager and filter pager. Basically, if you want to use find service, use get find pager. If you want to use filter service, you have to use, of course, get filter pager. And basically, that's it. Enrich the view with parameters And if we go to ng article, at the bottom, again, we are doing the same thing, iterating through results in pager, calling the ng content view action controller, passing in the content and location. We are specifying the view type. That's it. And also, we are rendering the pager fonta pagination at the bottom of this. So the end result is something like this. Okay, do you have any questions about this? No? Okay. So I think Petar can now show what is probably the most interesting feature in the whole site API. It's something called the query objects, query types, sorry. This is probably, just as a reference, we had one colleague in the company who is a front-end developer. And basically, he managed to do the whole project by himself without writing any single line of PHP code. A front-end developer, he's just doing CSS, not JavaScript, so he's not actually a developer. He just do some wizardry things with CSS, and he managed to do basically the whole site. And I believe he covered about 50% of estimated hours. So basically, in a half time, he finished the project. So I think this is amazing. Probably in the next year, this time he'll be a millionaire, right? I hope so. Okay, Petar, you can continue.
Okay, so this should be fun because we will delete a lot of code. I will basically continue with where Mario left. And we will write some query types. You do not need to follow with code. I will just present. But you can open the URL docs.netgen.io. So this is our documentation hub. And it has documentation for layouts, content browser, and site API. Site API documentation is actually quite fresh, so it's a work in progress, but I think it's already quite usable. So you can open the site API documentation and the query types section. Okay. Is this visible? Yeah, I think so. So as I previously mentioned, we have several query types of different purpose. General purpose, location, and content, and then those relating to relations, and location hierarchy. We'll first look a little bit into the query type configuration that you briefly saw previously. So the configuration is done under the queries key in the view configuration. So for example, in the content view YAML, this will happen here. Right? And beneath this key, I'll actually start writing one. Mario left on the ng article, I think, so we will replace the code from the controller with the query type. So queries. Let's call this tag relations. So this is the ID of the query. And beneath this key is where this configuration is located. So the first one is query type. which identifies the query type to be used. So in this case, we need, let's see what we have first. So we will need tag relation query type. And what are tag relation? Here you can see in this box, it is tag field content relations are content items tagged with the tag contained in the tag fields of a given content. It's maybe too much to process, but basically it finds the content which is tagged with tags contained in a tag field. So let's just copy the identifier of the query, and we will configure it here. Then we also need some common parameters, which are actually covered by the semantic configuration. So max per page. So let's say 10. Page. And for this, we will use a language expression that will extract the value of the page parameter from the query string in the URL. So the identifier for the language expression is @equals, and then query param. Page, and the default value, if the page is not set, is 1. This is, by the way, not yet documented, but will be shortly. So let's see what else we have. We have the use filter setting, which is by default true, which means the search in the background will use the filter service, which will work on the legacy search engine. This will work like that by default, and if you need, you can set the use filter to false, in which case the search will work on Solr if Solr is configured, right? And then finally, we have the parameters key, which actually configure the query type parameters. So let's see what we have there. Let's first see the controller that Mario wrote. So we have a full view controller and view articles, view article. So we will basically rewrite this controller into the query type. So you can see we have the tags field. So this is what we will configure here. Let's just check how the parameter is called. Okay, so the parameter is relation field. Yeah, and by the way, do you know which YAML configuration is the one that front-end developers modify, use and modify? It's this very one, the content view YAML. So that's kind of convenient. So we use tag field relation, query type, 10 per page, first page, look into the tags field for tags. What else is there? Okay, so we also have to set the content type. So let's see here in the controller what we are looking for. So we are not really specifying the content type. Let's then just define the sort. Let's do it a little bit different. We will sort it by name. Okay. Name ascending. The sort is also not documented, but I will quickly show you what is currently available. We will, of course, add this to the documentation and also a way how you can implement your own sort definitions, let's call it like that. So we have the sort close parser. And here on the class doc block, you can see what is currently possible to use for sort. So location depth, name, location priority, the content name, location priority, published and modified fields, and you can use any field from the content. So this basically maps directly to the sort clause from the search API. So the same as you would define field sort clause, you can do it with this string. So you say field, article title, descending, and the content returned will be sorted by the title field descending, just like that. But for this example, we just use name sort clause. Okay. So what we got here? We defined tag relations query. So let's use it. So we need to open the ng article template. And this is the block that renders the result of this controller. Let's first open this on the website. So we just need any article to showcase this. Okay. So this is the block that we render. Check this title, rendered by this line here. So here we configured tag relations query type. And now in the article, we will not use pager, which is instantiated in the controller. Right? But we'll use the query type. Okay. So set tag relations equals ng query, and the name of the query type is tag relations. Then we don't use the pager anymore. So we say if tag relations is defined, and this is, by the way, pager Fanta, right? So it's also pager, is defined, and it's not empty. Iterate over the items. And this will actually now return content items. So we will have to adapt this a little bit. All right. So back to template. The ng article template. OK, we lost the work there, but never mind that. So we basically need to redefine tag relations. Okay, then we replace, well, let's do a shortcut. Let's call this a pager. And this returns content items. So here we will use content, and for location we'll use main location. Actually realized that we could also use a location tag relation query. So this will be something I'll add in the future. So we can look directly for the locations, which is nice if you want to assert that locations are visible and so on. OK. So this should do it. Let's see what we have. Let's add something here. Check this out. And the reload is not working. Let's try it like this. OK. Okay, so we have, again, this block, but we said we want 10 items. So this does not make much sense. Let's do 3. The thing is, whenever you change the view configuration, the container has to compile, right? Because it's a semantic configuration. So it takes a little bit of time. But it's not too slow. So now we have 3 items. And at this point, we can remove the controller. We don't need it anymore. And we can delete this method. And it still works. There we go. So you can see here that we are displaying, these are galleries, I guess, videos, and articles. So let's add another query type to this view. Let's say we want videos and articles separately. Okay, let's indent this properly. Videos, articles. Okay, then we will have to configure this with the content type. ng video. ng article. And we have to handle this in the template. So we just copy this whole block from the if pager. I think this is the correct level. All right. And above, we'll use tag relations videos. And below, articles. Let me just double check if I got this right. Okay. So check this videos out. Okay, let's see how this looks like. There we go. So you can see by this small icon in the top left corner, these are videos, and these are articles. And by configuring the pager font with a different page parameter, I forgot the syntax, but it is possible. And then adapting this configuration, so maybe page videos and page articles, we don't need to do that now. You could even paginate them independently, right? Okay. But now you can see these 2 queries are actually pretty simple. So let's see how we can, what we can do to reuse those definitions so that we don't repeat them. They're basically identical. Okay, let's go to the documentation. Okay, a bit bigger. It's all really explained here. Okay, what we are interested in is called named query type configuration. So this is a separate key under the ng named query, not under the ng content view. So let's add this. And then we'll copy this configuration. Okay, tag relations, let's call it. By default, it will handle articles or videos. Let's keep it like that. Okay, so now we have what is called a named query configuration. This is not available in the template. So you can't say here ngQuery tag relations. But it is available for use in the view configuration. So we can reference this named query by its name, which is tag relations, below. So in the place where we basically had identical queries, we'll reference our named query. So let's see what we got with this change. All right, but now it fetches videos in the first block and also videos in the second block where you should have articles. So let's fix that. This format is actually a shortcut. The expanded version of this is this one. So basically the same thing. You can use it. You can use it when you don't need to define any additional parameters or override the existing parameters, which we will do next. Okay, let me just check. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so the proof is the same. Okay. So what we will do now, we will override this parameter. And what you can override is the first level keys on this level and other parameters separately. So in case when you have a deeper configuration, and this is also possible, I don't think we'll have time to go into that as well, you can't override something like this. So we can only override this level, right? But it's still pretty flexible, and it gives you very good functionality. Okay, so what we will do, we will, for the second query, say that we don't really want videos. We want articles. And there we go. These are now articles and not videos. It's pretty, I think it's pretty, what's the word, succinct. Yeah, it expresses well what it does. So I think it's quite readable. And I believe this is also the value of the YAML format, because some developers lately have been bitching that YAML is evil and that XML is the way. You know, you can also use XML for this kind of configuration. But for the semantic configuration, for the accessibility and for the readability of the thing, I think YAML versus XML, there's no comparison. This is just very easy to read. Okay. I think we have only a little bit of time now, so I will fast forward to the last commit. Okay, so this is no. Okay. Query type 6. So I obviously had more examples, but we'll just run through them. So I also rewrote the category page to use query types, which you can see here. I use the query type location children. Also quite simple to do. And the interesting bit, the recipes, yes. The related recipes. Well, let's first find one. Okay, so we'll open a recipe, which is also rendered by the query type. This list, it does not use the controller anymore. And then on a full view recipe, we also render latest recipes through the query type. You can see it here. And the last bit. All right, here it is. It's actually on the article. Okay. So I added another parameter here. So the same as you can override the defined parameter, you can add a new one. So I said publication date. And this is the property of the content. It's not a content field, right? Because of this, I know that it is the date field, and I'm able to parse this format. This is basically what PHP's, what is called str to time function accepts. So you can use all kinds of formats here, like dates, descriptive offsets, and so on, today, tomorrow, and so on. So basically said here, I want related videos published since last 2 days. So it's quite readable, right? And on the article for full view, I created one video that was published. It's a test video, and this is what we basically use to showcase this. I can also say in the last 20 days, this content is, by the way, very fresh, so this will now return, I think, all videos. Right. Okay, so I will just quickly go over the built-in query types to show you what's available. Let's look at the no, not this one. Let's look at the location children. So first thing to know, there are some common parameters, and when you implement your own custom query types, you can inherit all of these parameters. For starters, you have limit, offset, and sort, which is obvious, right? And you also have common content conditions. So content type, field, you can define conditions on the field. Publication date, we also add the modification date. This is missing. Section by the identifier, and object state by the identifier as well. So in your custom query type, you can inherit all of these. If it is a content query type, if it is a location, then you can also inherit the location conditions. This one is not a full list. We need to go to the general purpose location fetch. So this is the full list of the inherited location conditions. You can assert depth if the location is main or not, parent location ID, priority, subtree, and if it is visible or not. In a case of location children, we have additional property location, and this is the contextual. So the content you are viewing, this is where the location is taken from, and it is automatically configured. So you do not need to explicitly configure it. So it's automatically there, and some inherited location conditions do not apply on the children, so it's removed. And similar for the relations. For example, reverse relations. Content is automatically taken from the current content, so you do not need to configure this. You can, of course, do the language expression, but if you skip this, it will be automatically taken from the current content, and also relation field. And for the tag relations, you also have exclude self, so you do not want to fetch the current content, and so on. Yeah, so I think it's actually quite refined, but we'll also be working on improving this in the future. And yeah, with this, we now have only 2 minutes left, but maybe we don't have to be on time, so we can switch to questions if someone has any.
I think you can show the dependency of Site API, this extra search bundle that you also have.
Yeah, okay. This is what you saw when we went through the installation. So there are basically 2 bundles. Let me load this.
It's a very nice addition to Site API.
So this is a new repository that I created, how long ago? 2 months ago. Exactly for the Site API, because I missed some stuff. I didn't talk about this, but all the properties here work with identifiers, not IDs. So if the ID changes, you don't need to care about it. The content type works with the identifier, and same with the section, and same with the object state. And we actually missed this criteria in the kernel, so I needed to create them in my own repository. So this is what I added to the Easy Platform Search Extra, and over time I also added some additional bits. So the first one is field empty. This will work only with Solr. This is not yet added to the Site API query types, but will be. And it enables you to define the condition on if the specific field is empty or not. So for example, you only want to fetch articles that have the image field, and not the one without image field. So this is potentially very useful. It's only available for Solr. Then what I mentioned, object state identifier and section identifier, available both for Solr and Legacy. Then something that I call content subdocuments. This was actually needed for our current Cilius project, where we import products into Easy, and then, as you might or might not know, in Cilius you have products and product variants. So for example, you have perfume Chanel No. 5. This is a product, and then you have a product variant, which is the size of 50 milliliters, or a variant with the 100 milliliters, and so on. So this is the idea. And what the requirement was that we wanted to search for products. So we did not want to return back variants, but we wanted to assert conditions on the variant. So basically, a way to say, get me all perfumes with a price between, I don't know, 50 to 100 euros, and the volume between 50 and 100 milliliters. So for this, you need a structure, because if you denormalize everything on the parent content, you will lose structure. So you will not be able to get back products that matched both conditions, so that both the price is between 50 and 100 and the volume is between 50 and 100. So for this you need structure, and this the field type is also indexed on the content, and this indexes subdocuments in the Solar. So you are able to define the condition on the subdocument. So for example, you might have a concrete example. You might have a product with a variant, let's say we are talking about perfumes, that has a variant with the price 50 and the volume 150 euros and the volume 100 milliliters. And another variant which has the price 100 and the volume 50 milliliters. So if you denormalize, this does not make much sense, I realize now, but if you denormalize this on the content, on the product, and say I want perfumes with the price 50 and the volume 50, you will get back something, although it does not exist. So you basically need to combine. Yeah, it's a bit specific use case. And then, not to dwell on it, we also have a subdocument field sort clause that enables sorting on subdocuments. So you can, for example, say sort products by the variance, use the minimum price, stuff like that. Then we have something that is very interesting, and it's called the location query criterion. And it's used in content search. It's a criterion. But for it, you configure another criteria, location criteria. So you can combine location criteria, and with it, it is possible to express things like, find me content which has a visible location in this subtree and invisible location in that subtree, and has a location with a priority 10 in the third subtree. This is not currently possible with the Search API. It's also kind of specific about, we once had a project, it had a very complex content model. It was about the medicines, and the data was structured on multiple levels, and it all had semantic value, and this would be perfect for the use case like that. Then also custom field facet builder, and something that exposes the JSON facet API from Solar, so you can very easily get various statistics and all kinds of facets, even nested facets. For example, you can get back all the exams by the grade, and then facets for all grade faceted by the age, and very interesting stuff. But also kind of specific. You don't always need this. Yeah. So that's it. Any questions then? Okay, I guess not. So I hope if you are not convinced yet, that you will give this a serious chance and make an effort to try it, because I believe it will, what's the expression? It will make your worthwhile. It will be worthwhile.
Basically, we are using this for almost 2 years now, right?
Yeah.
The site API. So it become very valuable to us, and because of that, we just want to continue work on site API and adding new stuff that helps our development experience even better.
We will definitely continue development of this. We are dedicated to it, and it's not really going anywhere. So if you want to work with it, don't hesitate. And possibly we also convince easy to adopt it in one way or the other. So we make the whole CMS more available, and yeah, we get more people in. I think we would all benefit from that.
And please give a big applause to Petar. He is the original author of Site API.
And to Mario as well. Thanks.